It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning. We're going to get our heads around some issues that we probably need to address. You know, yesterday I shared a little bit about my own personal experience with the federal system. And this morning, or I should say last night, word broke on a new watchdog report that was out from the Milwaukee, Wisconsin Journal-Sentinel. And in that report, they outlined, their headline was, ATF uses rogue tactics in storefront stings across the nation. So we're going to talk a little bit about that because some of the examples that they've given here about how they utilized mentally deficient individuals, allowed children to smoke pot in their presence, let individuals who were known dangerous criminals and prior felons walk out of the building with weapons. How they bought weapons that they paid so much money for, they actually people were buying them at sporting goods stores, driving across town, legally buying them at sporting goods stores, like, you know, Gander Mountain and Bass Pro and so forth, and then driving over there and selling them to them for an immediate profit, literally 20 minutes after they bought it. They lost a machine gun, which has never been recovered. We're going to just kind of expose this because I got to tell you, this is the kind of thing that makes Americans feel like we live in a police state. And when you see this type of abuse going on about our nation, and the purpose of this is so separated from the realities of it. Well, anyway, we'll get into it. The title for that section is ATF. The F Troop of Agencies Runs Amok. Our second topic this morning will be on Syrian sarin. There's another lie that's been exposed by the Obama administration, and the media, of course, has ignored it. They haven't done their due diligence or done any kind of journalistic investigation. They took, again, the White House's and the administration and the government's word for what the truth was and published it verbatim. Seymour Hersh has come out with an excellent article that basically alleges the Obama administration lied about who made the sarin gas in Syria, that it was in fact the rebels, that we are supporting, that we are arming, that we are training with your taxpayer dollars. Hersh is a well-known, well-respected author. I believe he's a Pulitzer Prize winner. I mean, the guy's no slouch. He's one of the few journalists that's out there that actually is willing to step up and say the truth. Our third topic will be NSA infiltrates online gaming, according to Edward Snowden. Another bomb drops on the NSA. They've worked so massively in online gaming, including Xbox and all these video game systems that are out there, online game systems, that there were so many of them working here, trying to find one terrorist that was using these gaming systems to communicate or transfer money, that they actually had to write a plan to not conflict with each other. They called it a deconfliction document. I mean, I suspect that the reality was that what they were really doing wasn't necessarily looking for terrorists, but also enjoying their time on the government's and the taxpayers' dime while they played a lot of video games. I mean, the ridiculousness of that, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the issue of of the letter or the note that has been sent out by 500 authors globally about how this has to stop. All right, our fourth topic will be the Obamacare system ravages volunteer fire departments. Fire departments are going to lose their health insurance in the thousands across the country. That cannot be good for America. I mean, you know, even in suburban areas, it's not just rural. Most fire departments are not paid. And to strip them of their ability to provide health insurance for their firefighters who volunteer and put their lives in danger every day is just, it's criminal. Not to mention the fact that there's a new article that broke also in reference to the Obamacare exchanges being vulnerable to Wi-Fi attacks. All of them. The only one that wasn't was the federal one. But virtually every state exchange is vulnerable to Wi-Fi attack, where they can steal your information, your passwords, the data that you're, you know. The whole thing is just, I got to tell you, every day it's like just another torrent of abuse and treason. All right, let's get into our first story. This one's a good one. The ATF has been using rogue tactics in a half a dozen cities. All right, so you got to hear what's going on here. They open up these pawn shops and they open up these stores, and they populate them with ATF agents who try to act as if they are local community people. They ran a place called Squid Smoke Shop in Portland, Oregon, and they offered this guy. There was, I got to tell you, this is so disturbing, and there's so many instances of this. I could spend the entire morning show on this. The article that's in the JS Online, which I'll put a link to in this particular video, and it's on our website and on our Facebook page. It is so chock full of abuse that every person in the ATF should be criminally charged. They got people who were mentally deficient. I mean, people with an IQ of 55 and 74. And they got them to go out there and find them guns in the community, even though they knew the guy was a felon. And they were paying more money for these guns than they were worth by far. I mean, they were paying so much money for guns that people were going and buying guns at Gander Mountain and then driving and Bass Pro and big chain retail stores and Walmart, and then driving across town and selling them the same gun that they just bought 15 minutes ago for a profit. They actually got these two guys that were mentally disabled, and in order to encourage them to be part of the Squid Gang, they encouraged them and they paid for tattoos on their necks with tentacles creeping down their collarbones to show that they were part of the Squid team. Finally, these guys found out that they were being used to set up people in the community. I mean, this is permanent destruction and damage to an individual's body. And both guys were mentally deficient. Here's some of the highlights. ATF agents befriended mentally disabled people to drum up business and later arrested them in 4 cities in addition to Milwaukee. Wichita, Kansas, ATF agents referred to a man with a low IQ as slow-headed before deciding to use him secretly as a key cog in their sting. Agents in Albuquerque, New Mexico gave a brain-damaged drug addict with little knowledge of weapons a tutorial on machine guns, hoping he could find them one. By the way, a machine gun was stolen from them, and it's never been recovered. And they only got one machine gun in the entire sting of all of these different operations in all the different cities. They found one machine gun. And they lost one. So, status quo. Agents in several cities opened undercover gun and drug buying operations in safe zones near churches and schools, allowed juveniles to come in and play video games, and allowed teens to smoke marijuana, and provided alcohol to underage youth. In Portland, attorneys for 3 teens who were charged said a female agent dressed provocatively flirted with the boys and encouraged them to bring drugs and weapons to the store to sell. And they supplied them with alcohol. They didn't allow them to drink alcohol. They gave them the alcohol. Agents damaged buildings they rented for their operations, tearing out walls, rewiring electricity, and then walked off and stuck landlords with the repair bill. Property owner in Portland said agents removed a parking lot spotlight, damaged their new $30,000 roof, and caused leaks before they shut down and disappeared without a way for her to contact them. They have still not paid that owner, by the way. Agents pressed suspects for specific firearms that could fetch higher penalties in court. They allowed felons to walk out of the store armed with guns. In Wichita, agents suggested a felon take a shotgun, saw it off, and bring it back, and provided instructions on how to do it. The sawed-off gun allowed them to charge the man with a more serious crime, because now it's a National Firearms Act weapon. And it comes with a set of penalties that is a minimum of 3 years. In Pensacola, the ATF hired a felon to run its pawn shop. Wait until you hear this one. This one will top the cake. The move widened the pool of potential targets and boosted arrest numbers. Wait until you hear this. Even those trying to sell guns legally could be charged if they knowingly sold to a felon. So this guy put out the word that I'm a felon, and then if somebody sold him a gun, they were charged with it, with selling a gun to a felon, even though the person who was selling the gun was completely legal. The ATF's pawn shop partner was later convicted of pointing a loaded gun at someone outside a bar. Instead of a stiff sentence typically handed down to repeat offenders in federal court, he got 6 months in jail and a pat on the back from the prosecutor. In Milwaukee, they lost the machine gun. They've refused to respond to interview requests. I got to tell you, the number of crimes that were committed during these stings, and for the record, I know a lot of people in law enforcement. I know a lot of state employees who are state police, a lot of sheriff's departments. I know a lot of community police. I even know a lot of federal agents. And I got to tell you, the general resounding comment when you mention the ATF is, yeah, they're F Troop. You remember F Troop, the hapless knuckleheads from a television show back in the 60s? Yeah. The problem is with these hapless knuckleheads is that people are going to prison. How criminal is it to get people to come in and sell a gun to a guy behind a counter who the normal person would assume if he's buying guns, he's not doing something illegal, and then charge them with selling a gun to a guy who's a felon? Members of Congress demanded answers when this thing broke. The Department of Justice's Office of the Inspector General started a review. 8 months later, the ATF has not released a single finding, and the Justice Department investigation isn't complete. You see, what this is Fast and Furious Part 2, domestically. ATF acknowledged the failures in Milwaukee in a congressional briefing with staffers. Staffers. I don't want staffers answering this. I want a criminal prosecution. I want people in prison. At the same time, the agency, listen to this one, admitted they had no written procedures, policies, or guidelines for running undercover operations like this. And they promised to create a written policy, which has so far not been produced. They utilized pawn shops, tattoo parlors, recording studios, and thrift stores, all with no official protocol. They just went out and set these stores up. They set up one store, and they filled, you know what they do? They make it into a head shop, so they fill it up with glass pipes and bongs and crap like that. And the idea that they're going to draw people in who are going to be the type of people they want. Well, interestingly enough, one of their stores got robbed of all of their inventory. And that was the same one where they stole the machine gun out of the guy's car. Unfortunately, this is an agent's quote. Unfortunately, when it comes to reporting to Congress for budget reasons, the numbers are all that count. It is hard to define in a meaningful way to Congress that arresting one person with a long criminal history of 15 felonies is better than arresting 15 people with one felony each. So here's the deal. The storefront sells them like stuff like hip-hop clothing and shoes, cigarettes, and drug paraphernalia. They were selling cigarettes for as little as $2, for as much as $2 below the normal retail cost. And they were selling $100 blue jeans for $10. Their idea is to get these people in. Now, for the record, a lot of the communities that they started these in were outraged because what they said was, this is a middle-class community. We didn't have crime, but you guys opened this store and you drew in droves of them. You dragged people into our community that weren't there before. They were encouraging people to go out and rob homes and steal stuff. They were encouraging people to go steal and burglarize homes to steal jewelry and weapons and electronics and then buying it. Well, guess what? These criminals weren't robbing those neighborhoods until they opened their store. Most of the cases were so bad. Well, here's a lawyer for a defendant in Wichita. There is enough real crime out there. Why do you have to manufacture it? You're really creating crime, which you are then prosecuting. You got to wonder where the moral high ground is on this. I got to tell you, this is so illegal, so unconstitutional, so unethical, so immoral. They only had one real case that out of all of these cities, 6 cities they did this in, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of arrests. They never found a single kingpin. They never found a single guy who was manufacturing machine guns. They never found a single guy who was in charge of a ring. This was all low-level street crime. And the people they busted were nothing more than people that they encouraged to go out there and create the crime so that they could arrest them for it. There was only one guy. He was a guy who was twice indicted on first-degree murder charges, once for killing a guy in prison, and he was later busted in one of their storefront stings for being a felon in possession of a weapon, which gave him no more than a couple of years. In several of these cases, defendants still got stiff sentences, but others resulted in little or no punishment at all. In Wichita, nearly a third of the roughly 50 federal cases charged led to no prison time. Defendants either got probation or had their cases dismissed. One was even acquitted by a jury. These are not the results federal agencies will typically trumpet in the press. Former prosecutors and other experts say the success of these storefront stings should be measured by the capture of high-level targets, not street-level criminals looking to make a quick buck. Quote, this is a U.S. attorney in Milwaukee. For street crime in the federal system, we want cases to take us beyond the immediate person into a more significant and dangerous group. See, this is exactly what they do. They bust somebody small and then promise that guy that he'll get a reduction in sentence if he'll just turn him on to his sources or whatever the case may be. This guy continues on. He says, it seems like these cases stop with the particular individual. That's a waste of federal resources. And this guy is now a defense attorney who was the former head of the organized crime unit of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Milwaukee. He ought to know. He called the stings ineffective and lazy law enforcement. He and others have said that it's surprising that stings fail to take down criminal organizations or nab many major offenders. Quote, this is the same guy, to open a storefront and just have an ad hoc potluck hope, kind of a hope that maybe you'll find somebody who might commit crimes in your presence, that makes no sense to me. They got a bunch of table scraps. That's what they got when it comes right down to it. The list of egregious abuses here is so horrific. They did it in Pensacola. By the way, they got a guy here who was mentally deficient, and they kept giving him shirts and pants and stuff like that. They were giving him commission on stuff he would bring in. And they arrested him after it was all said and done on 100 counts of being a felon in possession of a weapon. The guy had an IQ where was it here? It was like he had an IQ of 54 or something like that. 54. Folks, that is borderline mental retardation. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I'm just saying that when you have an IQ of 54, you're lucky if you can spell your name. This guy actually went before the judge after they charged him on 100 accounts, and they said, I thought I was just doing my job. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. They tricked me into believing I was doing a good job. And they tell me I was doing a good job, pat me on the back, telling me, you're doing a good job, man. We'd hug each other and stuff like that. And they treated me like they cared about me. I told them I had a felony. I'm just trying to stay out of trouble and make some money. You got to be kidding me. They gave this guy 3 years in prison. He told the judge he was worried he'd be killed in prison because the government made it look like he was working for the agents. And most of the other people that they charged believed that. They are the defendants. You see, here's the problem. There's another one. Anything for $1 snags Little Squirrel in Pensacola. Jeremy Norris wasn't a felon. He wasn't prohibited from owning or selling weapons when he put his guns up for sale in a local weekly newspaper. He lived with his parents and his girlfriend. And so they went over and they offered him more money. He had an IQ of 76, a little bit higher than the last guy. But they say it's defined by experts as diminished mental capacity bordering mental retardation. In hours of ATF surveillance video, you can see him stumbling around at one point with his girlfriend, leading him around by the back of his shirt. He didn't have a car, so they went to him. And they offered him more money than his guns were worth. And I'm telling you, this is so criminal. They had a guy that they set up to run the pawn shop who was a felon. His name was Renaud. And if anybody sold him a gun, and he'd mention in casual passing while sometime during the course of their being in the store with him that he was a felon. And if the guy didn't pick up on that and recognize how criminal that was, and he sold him a gun anyway, they had him on tape, and then they'd charge the guy even though he wasn't a criminal. They were paying so much for guns that people went to gun stores, bought firearms, and then sold them to the storefront at a profit the same day. Then this guy Renaud, who was the criminal, and he, by the way, he and the agents joked that this guy that they were using to pin down was half retarded. That was their quote unquote. He's half retarded. By the way, this guy then, the felon that they got to run the store for them, he later on committed his own crime, a gun crime, and he got a break from prosecutors. I'll tell you what. They had one guy they were dealing with who was so mentally deficient, they had to give this guy a tutorial on what is a machine gun. All right, when we come back, I'm gonna tackle the rest of this article. This is so disturbing. You're listening to America's Voice Now. You can find this whole article on our website at americasvoicenow.org, facebook.com/America's Voice Now, and on YouTube it'll be right beneath the original header that describes the show. I'm furious about this. We'll be back in just a minute.